Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Overreading all these super complicated rules. Oh. You know, that really makes me think, do we need all those rules to play a tabletop RPG? What's the least amount of rules tabletop RPG actually needs? Honestly, kind of a silly question. Since, well, just people inventing characters and putting them into adventurous situations. That would make a great tabletop RPG without any rules. Although, that might be considered improv theater then. So, allow me to rephrase my question. What would be the least rule-intensive tabletop RPG someone would actually want to play? The someone in question? Obviously being me, since asking for your opinion will only be a call to action later into the video. I personally only need 3 things to enjoy any given tabletop RPG. First of all, is of course the exciting adventure. But that is largely dependent on whoever is running the game and whoever wrote the adventure. So I think it's only tangentially related to like the rule system in and of itself. So we will ignore that part for the moment at least. And the 2 other things are much more closely related to the rules though. Those being unique characters and gambling. Now there are a lot of possibilities to make a character unique, and let me be clear, I don't mean like they have to be necessarily intricate backstories, kind of a personal history and like a Wikipedia page for each character in and of itself. That can simply mean different builds and classes if we are going with D&D terms. They just need to play and feel different. You know, like a wizard being different from a barbarian, for example. One hits people with an axe, the other one hits people with a spectral axe, although that would probably more be a cleric thing. But you know what I mean. They are different. Not necessarily super fleshed out, but different. In this hypothetical rule non-intensive game, our characters will be defined by, first of all, their job, which in a medieval setting could mean being a knight. Then a personal special interest, or a hobby if you will, like playing the flute, for example. And then their main character trait, which might be something like being wrathful or short-tempered. That I personally like a lot because it gives players, especially new players, a kind of a instruction how to play their character. I do that in other RPGs as well. So my players usually then have some sort of guideline to see how their character would act. I experienced that myself when I was playing my first sort of games. I didn't really know how my character would behave in any given situation. So just having on the paper something like, well, he is short-tempered or that character is gentle, just often really helps players to like get into role-playing. But that's just an aside. I would just suggest everyone do that in every game in some way. Then the next one is of course their origin for our hypothetical knight character, for example. That could mean being a noble scion. I guess that would be the standard origin for any knight, but hey, maybe they started as a peasant and somehow made their way up to becoming a knight. Would also be very interesting. And lastly, of course, the personal development inside the adventure or through the adventure. That could mean stuff like an injury, for example, but it could also include a magic sword pulled out of a rock. In a way, it's personalized adventure notes, if you will. Note that for this very simple game, we won't be using any actual stats like, for example, hit points or mana or armor class or anything like that. We won't be needing decadent rules like that, because the game won't focus on play-by-play combat where we adjudicate every sword strike a character does and if it hits or doesn't. We will instead adjudicate the outcome of entire situations by rolling a die for that situation, in a sense. Example: our knight player is attacked by a drunkard in the streets of a city. Now, in Dungeons and Dragons, for example, you or the knight might, of course, strike back at the drunkard, drawing his sword, then roll for attack on the sword strike. Maybe he rolls a 15, gets a +5 modifier. 20 obviously hits some drunken beggar in the streets. And then they get to roll damage, 1d10 +3 probably. Rolling a 5, 8 points of damage, and that is plenty enough to probably behead the beggar. Instead, in this very simple game, our knight would be attacked by the beggar, and then they would get to roll a die, and that outcome, depending on how high it is, would determine if he, beats the beggar, kills him, but also how the townsfolk might react to our knight lethally attacking a more or less innocent citizen, if anyone even notices the commotion. Basically, the whole entire situation will be determined by that single die roll. In other words, the higher the roll, the better the outcome. Now you might be wondering, which die do we actually use for this kind of system? And what modifiers do we get for our dice rolls? And that is the great part. You can use any die you want, because you won't be getting any modifiers. You simply roll high, you do well, you roll low, you don't do well. Technically, you don't even need to roll dice. I mean, you can just toss a coin, toss multiple coins, or draw lots, for example. But that, of course, would be heresy, foregoing the dice, I mean. And that's honestly all I need for rules to enjoy a tabletop RPG. I think. Simply make an interesting character, put them in a dangerous situation, then roll some dice to see how well they manage. But rules, of course, follow the old adage. It's not about how long they are, it's about how you use them. So let's take a look at a couple of examples where I think the rules should be clarified, or I want to tell you how I would apply them in these situations. If you think back, we determined some characteristics for our characters. And I think those characteristics should be influencing gameplay, of course. As we don't have any modifiers, we kind of have to apply common sense to make a character who, for example, is good at sword fighting, better at sword fighting in this sort of game. And that will be largely dependent on your game master, of course. What I'm saying is a knight should be better at sword fighting, so have a higher chance to succeed and probably a better outcome when they succeed and a less bad outcome when they fail than a witch, for example, who doesn't even have a sword. And that can, of course, look differently depending on whoever is running your game. You could, of course, give your knight simply D&D style advantage on their sword fighting check, while the witch maybe even gets disadvantage. You can give them bonus dice, as many as you want, like in Call of Cthulhu. I mean, I guess it is technically possible, although I think they recommend you don't give more than 1 bonus die, but hey, it's a different rule system. Or you simply set the threshold to succeed for your knight lower than it would be for your witch. Or you give your knight a different die, like a d20, and your witch has to roll with a d6. All valid options, and totally up to you to decide. Note I said the game was not rule intensive. I didn't say it was easy, because I think doing that part of the game fairly can be quite challenging. But hey, I never tried it, and I will let you know if I do, if or when I do. And of course, the Game Master will also be responsible for determining what kind of equipment a character might be owning, for example. We won't be putting any sort of tools into the character sheet, if you will. Only like magical MacGuffins, essentially. So, as a Game Master, you would be required to say, well, you're a knight, you probably do have some armor on you and a sword, I guess, but a witch might not have that. But maybe they have a cauldron. So yeah, a lot of improv. In a sense, it's improv theater with dice. That's probably what it boils down to. And another responsibility, and a very difficult one, I think, for your Game Master is you, of course, have to know how success and misadventure look like when your characters roll dice. I mean, when fighting a beggar, it's probably simple when you just say, okay, well, you either beat the beggar, or the beggar beats you, or you are detected when attacking the beggar, and then the townsfolk is very unhappy with you. But specifically for the more important parts of your adventures, say you are hunting a dragon, so when your characters encounter the dragon, you should have a mental image what the best, worst, and standard outcome of any of that situation might be. Kinda like reading one of those choose-your-own-adventure books, but you roll a die to see which page you land on, and depending on how well you are prepared, you might have to write the page spontaneously when your characters roll to go on that page, if that makes sense. And one word of warning to anyone who might be tempted to play a session with this sort of system. Just because a player rolls the highest number on a check, it doesn't mean they necessarily succeed in whatever they are planning to do. For example, imagine your party being on an adventure, on a quest to slay a vicious dragon. And in the opening scene, they do encounter the dragon, who is probably about to eat a peasant or something. Then our heroic knight declares he will slay the dragon right then and there, and whatever dice you are using, he rolls the highest number, and therefore he succeeds, he beheads the dragon, and you guys get to go home before the pizza even arrives for the evening. That obviously can't happen like that. Rolling a high or even the highest result simply means the best outcome for the situation happens. In this opening situation, it is obviously not possible that the dragon is already slain. What might happen, and what probably happens, is the knight saves the peasant. And maybe he even injures the dragon. Maybe he even gets a little blood sprayed on him and is then invulnerable wherever the blood spatter landed. Maybe he even cuts off the dragon's arm. And conversely, just because a player fails miserably doesn't necessarily mean their character immediately dies. So, for example, if the knight declares, I will slay the dragon, and he fails spectacularly, doesn't mean he instead gets eaten by the dragon. Instead, probably the peasant gets eaten, and the knight might be injured. maybe he even loses an arm. That then has some sort of ramification later down the line. Ramification that, on a side note, should be noted in the personal development section of the character sheet. Yeah, just don't let your characters die immediately for failing to gamble once. I personally intend to let my players know when they put their characters in potentially mortal danger. So, for one thing, to increase the stakes of a situation. For example, when they corner the dragon in its lair, then that could be a potentially deadly situation. And secondly, because it gives them the opportunity to maybe prepare a little more and tilt the chances of success in their favor. Because that's really where this sort of game can shine, in my opinion. By translating even the wackiest player plan into a tangible benefit. Let me give you an example. Imagine our characters now not hunting a dragon, but a giant 8-headed snake. Taking this beast on with normal weapons would have no chance of success at all. Taking this beast on with a magic or divine weapon has a chance of survival, but is almost guaranteed to cost the lives of multiple party members. However, when they come up with a cunning plan, like, for example, brewing a lot of sake and letting each of the snake's heads drink from a barrel of said sake to make it both drunk and sleepy, and then killing the snake, that increases the chance of success massively. And yes, that is basically the story of how Susanoo, the Japanese storm and war god, defeated the giant 8-headed snake Yamata no Orochi, and then proceeded to find a magic sword inside one of the snake's 8 tails, which then became one of the Japanese regal or imperial regalia. My point is, classic ancient mythology tends to be extremely weird, and I think this sort of system can really recreate this sort of weirdness where a play-by-play sword swing against AC and subtract XYZ HP from a, I don't know, 500 HP pool of said snake would, in my opinion, kind of fail to transport the sort of vibe a classic mythological tale tends to have. But hey, that's just my guess for the best type of adventure I would like to play with this sort of system. Let me know what you think would be the best adventure to play with this system. And maybe if you're inspired and want to play or try this sort of system, you know the rules now. If you do, tell me in the comments how it goes. At some point I will try this system, and checking my calendar, it will be next St. Nimmerlein's Day at the latest. So once that happens, I will probably make a short update video, tell me how it goes. Maybe I find a quirk in the rules, or maybe I come to the conclusion we need a couple of more rules for the game. I will tell you then. And in order not to miss that, you better subscribe to this channel. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and yeah, I hope to see you in the next video I make. Until then, bye!